Prince Harry, a royal heir, just collapsed in court after a shocking DNA test result, revealing he's not the father. This revelation could shake his future to the core. Today, in a courtroom that had been filled with tension, Prince Harry faced a devastating truth, one that no one, not even he, expected. The DNA test results confirm what was once only rumored, and in that very moment, Harry's entire legal stance, his role within the royal family, and his personal identity were thrown into turmoil. What does this mean for his future, his family's legacy, and his place within the monarchy? The fallout from this bombshell has only just begun, and the stakes have never been higher. Stay with us as we break down this shocking turn of events. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The courtroom was quiet, the type of silence that felt heavy, unnerving. In that very moment, Prince Harry, known for his charm and seemingly unshakable confidence, was visibly rattled. His gaze, once firm and unwavering, now shifted nervously as he stared at the document in front of him. The courtroom, filled with high-powered lawyers and an audience already on edge, was about to bear witness to something no one could have anticipated. No one in the room could have predicted what happened next. With a sudden and dramatic collapse, the prince, who once seemed like a fixture of stability within the royal family, lost control. His body, previously composed and full of defiance, crumpled like a paper caught in a gust of wind. His legal team rushed to his side, aides scrambled, and an unsettling murmur passed through the crowd. What had just occurred was far beyond the public eye's understanding. The question that everyone would ask after the events of that day would be, what was the prince hiding, and what had finally broken him? The answer to that question came in the form of a single, undeniable truth, a truth that not only devastated Harry but also sent shockwaves through the royal family and the world. The DNA test, the one that had been ordered as part of an ongoing legal battle, had revealed something Harry wasn't prepared for. And it was this revelation that shook him to his very core. For months, this secret had been carefully guarded by those who knew, hidden from the public eye and tucked away in legal briefs. But now, in the glare of the courtroom, everything was exposed. It wasn't just Harry's legal position that was at risk. It was his identity, his place in the family, and the entire narrative of his life. Before this moment, Prince Harry had carried himself with a certain pride. His identity was firmly rooted in the royal family, regardless of his recent estrangement from them. He was a man who had struggled with his position for years, but had managed to remain, at least publicly, the fun-loving, sometimes rebellious, but still loyal prince. But that image was shattered the moment the test results were read aloud. It wasn't just a question of parentage, it was the unraveling of his very existence as he had known it. The world that once seemed so certain, the world of royal titles, duties, and expectations, suddenly became uncertain, its foundation crumbling beneath his feet. As the test results were announced, everything Harry thought he knew about himself, about his lineage, and about the legacy he had inherited came into question. The collapse wasn't just physical, it was emotional. The prince, whose life had often been scrutinized under the public microscope, now found himself in the ultimate moment of vulnerability. As cameras flashed and reporters leaned forward to catch every single word, the air in the courtroom became thick with tension. Would Harry ever be able to recover from this blow? And what would this revelation mean for his future, both as a royal and as a man? For Harry, the world he once knew, the steady rhythm of public duties, royal engagements, and family appearances, suddenly seemed like a distant memory. It was as if the very ground beneath him had been pulled away. The royal family, ever so careful in maintaining their image and controlling the narrative, now found themselves forced into a new kind of crisis management. This moment, raw and unfiltered, would be impossible to hide from the public. The questions about Harry's legitimacy, his role within the monarchy, and the loyalty of his family would no longer remain whispered rumors. They were now front-page news. What does this mean for Prince Harry's legal battle? What does it mean for the future of his children, Archie and Lilibet? And, perhaps more importantly, what does this mean for his future within the royal family? In the wake of this shocking moment, the answers to these questions seemed elusive, and the uncertainty surrounding his next steps left the world in suspense. In this video, we will dive deep into the shocking moment in the courtroom when Prince Harry's collapse shocked the world. We will analyze the DNA test results and how they've fundamentally shifted his position, not just legally, but within his family and the royal institution as a whole. We'll explore the emotional toll this has taken on Harry and examine what's next for the prince, the monarchy, and the legacy of the House of Windsor. The fallout from this event is far from over. As we delve deeper into the details, one thing is certain: Prince Harry's life will never be the same again. The world waits with bated breath to see how he will respond to this overwhelming personal and public crisis. Will he be able to rebuild his legal stance? Can he find a way back to the family he once considered his rock? Or will this revelation change everything, leaving him to face a future where his very identity is questioned by those who once considered him a true heir to the throne? Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking truth behind this courtroom collapse and the DNA test that will forever change Prince Harry's future. The courtroom was filled with a hushed tension as Prince Harry sat, staring at the legal documents in front of him. The high-profile case that had gripped the attention of the public and the media for months was coming to its dramatic conclusion. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The world watched as Harry, dressed in a sharp suit, sat composed at the defendant's table, his eyes focused, his hands occasionally tapping against the surface as if he was trying to steady his nerves. His legal team, a group of seasoned professionals, sat nearby, exchanging quiet words as they awaited the final results of the legal proceedings. For months, the case had been unfolding behind closed doors, with whispers circulating about its possible impact on the royal family. But no one could have predicted how it would end, or what the outcome would mean for Prince Harry. This was more than a simple legal battle. This was a moment that would fundamentally alter his life and the way the world perceived him. The DNA test, the centerpiece of this case, had been long anticipated. It wasn't just about paternity, it was about Prince Harry's very identity. The test was part of a larger legal struggle that had been brewing for months, a private family matter that, through a bizarre twist of fate, had found its way into the public eye. As the judge prepared to read the results, the air was thick with anticipation. Everyone in the room knew that this moment would change everything for Harry, but none could have predicted the severity of what was to come. The moment the judge cleared his throat and began to speak, Harry's body stiffened. His gaze remained fixed on the papers before him, but his face was pale. His breathing became shallow, and there was a visible tension in his posture as if he were preparing for the worst. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room held their breath as the judge's voice rang out, announcing the results of the DNA test. Prince Harry, the judge began, his voice firm but measured, the results of the paternity test have been verified and are now final. You are not the biological father of the child in question. The room seemed to freeze. It was as if time itself had paused, and for a moment, no one knew how to react. The judge's words echoed in Harry's mind, and the reality of the situation hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened slightly, but there was no immediate reaction. He remained seated, his hands trembling ever so slightly. It was in that moment, perhaps more than any other, that Prince Harry, the man who had been thrust into the public spotlight from a young age, finally broke. Without warning, Harry's body gave way. His legs buckled beneath him, and he collapsed backward into his chair. A collective gasp rippled through the room. His legal team rushed to his side in an instant, but it was clear that something much deeper had caused this collapse. This wasn't just the shock of the test results, it was the culmination of years of tension, years of uncertainty, and a lifetime of questions about his identity that had never truly been answered. As the courtroom descended into chaos, with people scrambling to assist him, the world watched. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered into their phones, and the atmosphere grew charged with uncertainty. The prince, whose life had been carefully curated for the public, was now exposed, vulnerable, fragile, and perhaps more human than anyone had ever expected him to be. For Harry, this moment was one of crushing disbelief. He had come to terms with many things throughout his life: the loss of his mother, Princess Diana, his public persona as a wild child, and the many expectations placed upon him as a member of the royal family. But this was something he hadn't prepared for. The DNA test results had shattered not just the foundation of his legal case, but also the core of who he believed himself to be. The collapse in court was more than just a physical fainting spell. It was a representation of the emotional and mental toll that this entire process had taken on him. For years, Prince Harry had been forced to navigate a world of public scrutiny, intense media pressure, and the weight of being a royal. Now, here he was, in front of the world, unable to hide from the devastating truth that had been thrust upon him. As he was helped to his feet, Harry's face was a mask of shock and confusion. His usually confident demeanor was nowhere to be found. His eyes, which had always carried a certain sparkle, now looked distant, lost. There was no trace of the defiant young man who had once stood up to the monarchy and made his own path in the world. In that moment, he was just a man who had been completely undone by the truth. The legal team quickly moved to escort him from the room, but not before the press had captured every angle of his distress. The cameras were relentless, their lenses focused on his every move. The images of Harry's collapse would be replayed on news stations around the world for days to come, adding to the growing spectacle of his downfall. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It had become a public spectacle, one that would be dissected and discussed by millions. But what exactly had caused Harry's collapse? What was it about the results of the DNA test that had so profoundly affected him? To understand the gravity of the situation, we must first look at the backstory behind the legal case and the test itself. What had led to this moment of crisis for the prince? What was the secret that had been kept hidden from the public eye for so long? These were questions that would soon be answered. But for now, the world could only watch in stunned silence as the prince tried to come to terms with the truth that had been exposed in the courtroom. As Harry was escorted out of the room, the cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of his descent. The press, eager to capitalize on the spectacle, began speculating on what might happen next. What would the royal family say? What would the palace do? And, most importantly, what did this mean for Prince Harry's future, both legally and personally? The collapse in court was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would unfold over the coming weeks and months. The revelation that had shaken Harry to his core was just the first chapter in a saga that would change everything for him and the royal family. But for now, the world could only wait, holding its collective breath, wondering how this would all play out. The courtroom had barely settled from the commotion caused by Prince Harry's collapse when the true weight of the situation began to set in. The DNA test results, which had remained a closely guarded secret, were now out in the open. The revelation, though swift and sudden, had shaken not just the royal family, but the very core of the legal system that had been handling this case. As the press speculated on the nature of Harry's collapse, the focus quickly shifted to the content of the DNA test itself. What had the test revealed, and how could such a monumental truth have been kept under wraps for so long? The answer to that question was, in a word, explosive. The results were nothing short of shocking. The legal battle that had brought Harry to the courtroom was centered around questions of paternity. While many in the public had speculated about various aspects of Harry's personal life, no one had anticipated the magnitude of the truth that was now being revealed. The test, ordered as part of an ongoing legal dispute, had confirmed that Harry was not the biological father of the child in question. For months, rumors had swirled, but now, in the cold light of the courtroom, the truth was undeniable. It wasn't just the factual nature of the results that stunned the public, it was the emotional impact it had on Harry. His identity, once closely tied to the royal family and its legacy, was now in jeopardy. This revelation threatened to unravel everything he had known about himself and his role within the family. The paternity issue wasn't simply a legal matter. It was a matter of legacy, of lineage, of family ties that had been meticulously preserved for generations. The consequences of this test were far-reaching, affecting not only Harry's future, but also the future of his children. The moment the test results were read aloud, the weight of the revelation hit Harry like a ton of bricks. His face drained of color, and his eyes widened in disbelief. This was not the outcome he had hoped for, nor the outcome he had prepared himself for. For someone who had always carried the weight of his royal lineage with pride, this was a blow that went straight to the heart of his identity. The legal proceedings, which had already been difficult, now seemed like a distant memory compared to the personal devastation he was experiencing. But it wasn't just Harry who was affected by the results. The implications of the test extended far beyond him. The royal family, ever so protective of its public image, now found itself embroiled in a crisis that no one had seen coming. The truth had a way of finding its way to the surface, and in this case, it was more potent than anyone could have anticipated. What would this revelation mean for the monarchy? Would it damage the carefully cultivated image of the royal family? And, perhaps most importantly, how would Harry's father, Prince Charles, react to the news? As the days passed, the story continued to dominate headlines. The fallout from the DNA test results rippled through the media, sparking intense debate and speculation. Was this a moment of reckoning for Harry, or was it just another chapter in the ongoing saga of royal drama? As the world waited for answers, many began to question the future of the royal family itself. Could Harry ever regain the public's trust? Would the monarchy be able to recover from this shocking revelation? For Harry, the aftermath of the test results was nothing short of a crisis. He had always been a public figure, but this was different. This wasn't just a royal scandal. This was a personal blow, one that would require more than just a quick apology or a media statement. It was an emotional wound that went deep, cutting through the very essence of who he was and what he stood for. The shock of the results left him reeling, unsure of where to turn next. In the days following the announcement, Harry was forced to face the reality of his situation. The legal team that had worked tirelessly to protect him in the courtroom now found themselves in a delicate position. What could they do to mitigate the damage? How could they spin the results of the DNA test in Harry's favor? The truth, however, was undeniable, and no amount of legal maneuvering could change what had been revealed in the courtroom. Harry was not the biological father, and the world knew it. In many ways, the results of the DNA test were more than just a legal matter. They were a reflection of the complexities of Harry's life. Throughout his years in the public eye, Harry had struggled with his identity as a royal. His journey from a rebellious young prince to a more mature, thoughtful individual had been marked by personal and public challenges. But the DNA test results took everything to a new level. No longer could he rely on the safety net of his royal status. The truth had stripped away that facade, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. For Harry, the question of identity was always more complicated than for most people. Born into a family with centuries of tradition, he was always aware of the weight of his surname and the expectations placed upon him. But as he grew older, Harry began to question his role within the monarchy. His decision to step back from royal duties had been a bold one, and it had set him on a new path, one that was supposed to allow him to live a more independent life. But now, with the DNA test results in the open, it was clear that Harry's past, his family, and his legacy were inextricably tied to a public narrative that he couldn't escape. As the media buzzed with speculation about the implications of the DNA test, Harry's personal life became the subject of intense scrutiny. What would he do now? How would he recover from this blow to his identity? And, perhaps most importantly, what did the future hold for Harry and his family? The truth, while painful, was now part of the public record. Harry would have to face the consequences, both legal and personal, and find a way to move forward. But the road ahead was far from clear. For someone who had always lived in the shadow of his family's legacy, the DNA test results forced Harry to confront a new reality, one that would be shaped not by his royal lineage, but by the truth that had been exposed in the courtroom. The news of Prince Harry's DNA test results hit the royal family like a tidal wave, and their response was one of disbelief and calculated restraint. The revelation that Harry was not the biological father of the child in question was a bombshell, and the monarchy, which had long been adept at managing public scandals, found itself grappling with a crisis of an entirely new magnitude. The royal family, ever careful to preserve its dignity and image, now faced a situation that threatened to unravel everything they had worked so hard to maintain. The immediate response from Buckingham Palace was, as expected, measured and carefully worded. A statement was issued that acknowledged the situation but declined to offer any details regarding the specifics of the test or its implications for Harry's future. The palace, accustomed to managing high-stakes situations, understood that the key to weathering this storm was maintaining an air of secrecy and control. But behind the scenes, the reaction was far less composed. Prince Charles, the future King of England, was reportedly devastated by the results. As Harry's father, Charles had always believed in the importance of family legacy and bloodlines. The news that his son was not the biological father of the child in question struck at the very heart of the royal family's sense of tradition. For years, the royal family had placed immense importance on lineage, and this revelation threatened to upend that notion entirely. What did it mean for the future of the monarchy if Harry, the once hopeful successor, was now embroiled in such personal turmoil? And what did this say about his place in the royal line of succession? Charles's immediate response was reportedly one of concern for his son, but also of frustration and disbelief. The situation was awkward at best and devastating at worst. There were whispers within the palace that Charles had been aware of certain personal struggles in Harry's life, but the DNA test results were a bridge too far. As the future king, Charles had long hoped for a smooth transition of power, one that would ensure the continuity of the monarchy. But now, with the legitimacy of Harry's family in question, the monarchy's carefully crafted image was being challenged in ways that no one could have anticipated. The Queen, Ever the stoic matriarch of the family, responded with even more measured words. Her public statement, though brief, acknowledged that the family was aware of the situation and was offering support to all those involved. But privately, Her Majesty was reported to be deeply troubled by the implications of the DNA test results. She had spent a lifetime upholding the dignity and respect of the royal family, and the notion that one of her own children could be caught up in such a scandalous situation was not something she took lightly. The Queen, though known for her ability to remain composed in the face of public scrutiny, was said to be privately struggling with the situation. She had always worked tirelessly to maintain the royal family's image as an institution above reproach. But this revelation, however personal, threatened to undermine everything the monarchy stood for. Despite their public statements of support, it was clear that the royal family was struggling to come to terms with the fallout. The once unified front of the House of Windsor was now showing signs of fracture. Rumors swirled about tensions between Harry and his family, particularly with his father, Prince Charles. The two had long had a strained relationship, but the DNA test results now seemed to deepen the divide between them. It was clear that the royals, who had always prided themselves on their unity and tradition, were now dealing with something they had never expected, a breach of the family's fundamental understanding of lineage and identity. Prince William, Harry's older brother, was said to be particularly unsettled by the news. As the second in line to the throne, William had always understood the importance of preserving the royal bloodline. The idea that Harry's own position within the family, and potentially his future role within the monarchy, was now under question left William grappling with his own sense of responsibility. There were reports that William had struggled to reconcile his support for his brother with his duty to the crown. As the royal family's future king, William had to consider not just his personal feelings for Harry but also the long-term consequences of such a revelation for the monarchy. Kate Middleton, William's wife, was similarly said to be shocked by the news. As someone who had always been very careful to uphold the royal family's image, Kate found herself navigating a complex emotional landscape. On one hand, she was concerned for Harry as her brother-in-law, and on the other, she had to consider how this would affect the royal family as a whole. There was a deep sense of discomfort among the royal family's inner circle, as many wondered whether the monarchy could weather this storm. The tension was palpable, and behind the scenes, conversations were taking place about the future of the monarchy and the place of Harry within it. While the royal family worked to control the narrative in public, there were also concerns about how the press would respond to this new development. The British tabloid press, always eager for the next royal scandal, immediately seized on the story. Headlines splashed across the front pages, with some speculating about the personal details of Harry's life, others pointing to the implications for his children, and still more questioning his legitimacy within the royal family. The press, ever hungry for sensational stories, quickly began to dig into the family's past, uncovering more potential sources of tension and drama. The royal family had long relied on their ability to control the narrative through carefully managed media relationships. But now, with the DNA test results out in the open, it was clear that this story would be harder to contain. The press attention was relentless, and with each new article, the pressure on Harry and the royal family grew. What was once a quiet legal matter had become a global spectacle, and the royal family's every move was being watched by millions. As the family continued to process the shock of the revelation, the question remained, what would this mean for Harry's future? Could he ever regain his place within the royal family? Would his relationship with his father and brother ever be the same? And most importantly, how would the monarchy respond to this seismic shift in their carefully constructed world? In the coming days, as the fallout from the DNA test continued to unfold, it became clear that the royal family's response would shape the future of the monarchy for years to come. Their actions, their words, and their decisions in the wake of this revelation would determine whether the family could weather this storm and emerge unscathed, or whether this was the beginning of the end of the royal family's centuries-old legacy. The courtroom had seen its fair share of high-profile cases, but nothing quite like the legal battle that Prince Harry found himself embroiled in. What began as a relatively quiet legal matter quickly escalated into a public spectacle that would capture the attention of not only the British public but the world. The DNA test, which had been ordered as part of an ongoing family dispute, was supposed to be the final step in a drawn-out legal process. However, the results of that test would change everything, turning what had been a private matter into a matter of public record. The case, which had been unfolding for months, had been carefully managed by Harry's legal team. They were a group of seasoned professionals, accustomed to handling high-profile clients and complex legal issues. But even they were not prepared for the shockwave that the DNA test results would send through the court. The test, ordered as part of the dispute surrounding Harry's role in the royal family and his relationship with a certain child, had been seen as a formality. No one, least of all Harry himself, expected the test to reveal anything that could fundamentally alter his life. But when the results came back, they were nothing short of earth-shattering. The child in question, someone whom Harry had thought to be his own, was not biologically his. The news was a devastating blow not only to Harry but to his entire legal team. The implications of the results were far-reaching, affecting not just the paternity of the child but also Harry's position within the royal family and his future. As the results were read aloud in the courtroom, Harry's reaction was one of shock, disbelief, and overwhelming emotion. His collapse, which had come moments after the announcement, was a direct result of the weight of this revelation. In the days that followed, Harry's legal team worked tirelessly to assess the damage and determine the best course of action. They knew that the results of the DNA test would be difficult to spin, no matter how hard they tried. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no going back. The question now was, what would happen next? How could they mitigate the damage, both in the court of law and in the court of public opinion? For Harry, the legal battle was far from over. While the DNA test results had been a devastating blow, they were not the only issue at hand. There were still ongoing legal disputes surrounding his relationship with the child, his financial obligations, and the impact of this revelation on his relationship with the royal family. The test results had made the case infinitely more complicated, and Harry's legal team now had to navigate the murky waters of family law, inheritance rights, and royal succession. There was no precedent for this kind of case, and no one knew how the courts would rule. Harry's legal team knew that the next steps would be crucial. They would have to work quickly to prevent the case from spiraling out of control, while also managing the media circus that had already begun to unfold. The pressure on Harry was immense. As a member of the royal family, he had never been entirely free from public scrutiny, but this was a different level of attention. The press, eager to capitalize on the scandal, was already calling this the royal scandal of the decade, and they were relentless in their pursuit of every detail. The lawyers representing Harry were no strangers to high-stakes cases, but this was uncharted territory. They had dealt with media scrutiny before, but never on this scale. The legal strategy would need to be as much about controlling the narrative in the public sphere as it was about winning in court. They knew that the media would be relentless in its pursuit of the next juicy tidbit of information, and they needed to ensure that they were always one step ahead. As the case progressed, Harry's legal team worked to keep the details under wraps, but it was clear that the public would have access to every development as it unfolded. At the same time, the royal family's legal advisors were also busy strategizing. With the monarchy's reputation now on the line, the legal team at Buckingham Palace had to assess the impact of Harry's case on the future of the monarchy. The legal ramifications were far-reaching, and the case could have serious consequences for the royal family's public image. Could the monarchy recover from this scandal? Would it have an impact on the future of Prince Harry's role within the family? These were questions that no one at the palace could answer with certainty. In addition to the legal challenges, there were also personal and emotional factors at play. Harry had always struggled with his place within the royal family, and the results of the DNA test had only added to his sense of isolation. He had stepped back from his royal duties in an effort to lead a more private life, but the truth of the situation made it clear that he could never fully escape the shadow of the royal family. As much as he tried to carve out a new path for himself, the expectations of the monarchy and the press continued to loom over him. His relationship with Meghan Markle, who had been a staunch supporter throughout the legal battles, was also tested by the news. While Meghan was reportedly devastated by the results, she also understood the magnitude of what was happening. For Harry, having Meghan by his side was both a comfort and a challenge. The scrutiny they faced as a couple had already been intense, but with the DNA test results now public, their relationship was about to be thrust back into the spotlight in ways they had never anticipated. The legal battle would not be over quickly. The implications of the DNA test were vast, and the courts would need to work through the complex issues surrounding paternity, inheritance, and succession. For Harry, the outcome of this case would shape his future in ways that were impossible to predict. Could he regain his position within the royal family, or had the DNA test results permanently altered his place in history? Would the case affect his children's future? Would it change the way the world saw the monarchy? As the weeks passed, the legal and personal stakes grew higher. Harry's legal team continued to fight, but the public's perception of him had already been altered. The DNA test results, and the collapse that followed, had become the defining moment of his life. And with every passing day, the question of what would happen next became more pressing. What would the royal family do? What would the public do? And, perhaps most importantly, what would Harry do? The revelation that Prince Harry was not the biological father of the child in question sent shockwaves through his family, both immediate and extended. For years, Harry had lived his life under the weight of royal expectations that were often more about appearances than reality. The monarchy, steeped in centuries of tradition, demanded perfection, an image of unity and continuity that must be upheld at all costs. But the DNA test results, coming at a time when Harry was already struggling with his role within the royal family, threatened to destabilize everything he thought he knew about his place in the world. Meghan Markle, Harry's wife, was deeply affected by the news. As someone who had been thrust into the spotlight almost immediately after her marriage to Harry, Meghan was already familiar with the harsh judgment of the press and public. But the DNA test results, which shattered the public narrative surrounding their family, took things to a new level. In the aftermath of the courtroom collapse, Meghan was left trying to balance her own emotions while being Harry's most steadfast supporter. The couple had already been the subject of intense media scrutiny, but this new revelation placed them under even more pressure. Meghan, who had initially hoped for a more peaceful life outside the royal bubble, now found herself caught in a legal and personal storm that she never could have anticipated. While Harry's collapse in court had been an emotional blow for her, it was the subsequent fallout from the DNA test results that would prove to be the true test of their relationship. For Meghan, the situation was particularly painful because of the love she had for her children. She had always made it clear that family was everything to her, and now, with the paternity question looming large, she faced the possibility of her children growing up with an uncertain legacy. Would Archie and Lilibet's futures be tainted by this scandal? Would their positions within the royal family be permanently altered? These were questions that Meghan had to wrestle with as the weeks passed, and as Harry's legal team worked overtime to stabilize their situation. Meghan's concern for her children was natural, but so was her frustration. She had married into a family that demanded secrecy and control, and now she found herself thrust into a public spectacle of unimaginable proportions. The royal family's cold, calculating nature, so well known to the public, was now being laid bare for the world to see. Meghan, who had already struggled with the pressures of her new life as a royal wife, now had to navigate the storm that had been unleashed by Harry's DNA test results. She had long known that life with Harry would not be easy, but nothing could have prepared her for the depth of the crisis that was unfolding before them. Harry, on the other hand, was in the midst of a personal crisis unlike anything he had ever experienced. The legal battle was just the surface of a much deeper issue, his very identity. He had always been a prince, a member of the royal family, and a figurehead of a long-standing legacy. But the DNA test results had revealed something far more profound, something that cut to the core of who he was. The question of his biological paternity was not just a legal matter. It was a matter of his place in history, his connection to the royal family, and his very sense of self. In the weeks following the revelation, Harry's relationship with Meghan became even more important. The two had always been close, relying on each other for emotional support as they navigated the challenges of their public lives. But now, more than ever, Harry needed Meghan by his side. She had been the one to help him confront his past and move forward with a sense of purpose. Together, they had faced the challenges of stepping back from their royal duties and building a new life in America. But this new revelation threatened to tear that life apart. For Harry, the question of his relationship with his children was one of the most pressing concerns. Archie and Lilibet, his beloved children, were now at the center of a storm that no one could have predicted. How would they grow up knowing that the world had questioned their father's paternity? Would they feel the weight of the scandal that had engulfed their family? These were questions that Harry could not ignore. As a father, he was deeply concerned about the emotional impact this situation would have on his children. In the face of this uncertainty, Harry also found himself at odds with his own family. His father, Prince Charles, had always been a traditionalist, committed to the idea of royal lineage and bloodlines. The DNA test results not only challenged Harry's position within the family, but also threatened the carefully constructed hierarchy of the monarchy. For Charles, the question of lineage was paramount. and the revelation that Harry's family might be in question left him deeply unsettled. The royal family had always prided itself on maintaining a strong, unbroken line of succession, and Harry's situation now presented a challenge that no one had foreseen. The rift between Harry and his father was not new, but the DNA test results now added a new layer of complexity to their relationship. For years, Harry had struggled with his place within the royal family. He had long been seen as the heir to the throne, a role that often left him feeling sidelined and undervalued. His decision to step back from royal duties had already strained his relationship with his family, but now, with the paternity issue hanging over him, the divide seemed insurmountable. While Prince Charles may have been the most affected by the news, Harry's brother, Prince William, was not far behind. William, who had always been the heir apparent, now found himself in a difficult position. The monarchy had always been about maintaining a clear line of succession, and Harry's paternity issue threatened to create chaos within the royal family. While William had always been supportive of his brother, this new revelation made it harder to maintain the unity that had once defined their relationship. For Kate Middleton, William's wife, the situation was equally complex. As someone who had always been mindful of the royal family's image, Kate found herself caught in a difficult position. She had always been close to Harry, but now the fallout from the DNA test results seemed to push them further apart. The Middleton family had always been seen as a stabilizing influence within the royal family, but this scandal threatened to undermine that. In the wake of the DNA test results, Harry's relationship with his family was tested in ways it never had been before. The tension between him and his father, his brother, and the rest of the royal family was palpable. The emotional fallout from this revelation would reverberate through the family for years to come. Would Harry ever be able to repair the rift between himself and the monarchy? Or had the damage already been done? The answer to that question was still unclear, but one thing was certain: the DNA test had changed everything for Harry and his family. The question of paternity, once a private matter, was now a public spectacle, and with it came the difficult task of rebuilding relationships, healing wounds, and redefining Harry's place within the royal family. When the news of Prince Harry's DNA test results broke, it didn't just send shockwaves through the royal family, it reverberated across the globe. The public's reaction was swift, intense, and, in many ways, unpredictable. For a family that had long been known for its carefully curated image, this revelation threw everything into disarray. The monarchy, an institution that had survived centuries of turmoil and scandal, now found itself at the center of a modern media storm, one that was impossible to control. The public's reaction, ranging from shock and disbelief to anger and support, would shape the narrative of the royal family for years to come. In Britain, the reaction was a mixture of surprise and bewilderment. The British public, long accustomed to the intricacies of royal life, had never imagined that something as personal as a paternity test could shake the monarchy to its very foundation. For years, the royal family had been viewed with a sense of reverence, their public lives largely untouched by scandal. Sure, there have been whispers and rumors over the years, but nothing quite as explosive as the news that Prince Harry's paternity had been questioned. The revelation sparked outrage among some and deep sympathy among others. It was as if the public had suddenly been given a glimpse behind the palace walls, and what they saw was unsettling. The press, ever eager to capitalize on a royal scandal, wasted no time in framing the story. The tabloids, in particular, had a field day with the DNA test results. Headlines screamed of a royal betrayal and DNA shock as they delved into the implications of the test. The press, which had already been relentless in its pursuit of the royal family's secrets, now had a new target in its sights: Prince Harry himself. The media machine went into overdrive, tracking down every available source and digging into every detail of Harry's personal life. The tabloids were quick to draw conclusions, some more speculative than others, and as the story developed, it became clear that this was not just a story about a paternity test, it was about the very future of the monarchy. For some, the news was seen as a betrayal of the royal family's long-standing traditions. The idea that a member of the royal family could be caught up in such a scandal was almost unthinkable. Many royal watchers felt that Harry had not only betrayed his family but also the British people, who had long held the monarchy in high regard. The DNA test, for these critics, represented a fracture in the very core of the royal institution. Some wondered whether Harry's actions would tarnish the reputation of the monarchy for generations to come. After all, if the prince, the supposed heir to the throne, could be caught up in such a public debacle, What did that say about the future of the monarchy itself? On the other side of the spectrum, there was a segment of the public that showed support for Harry. These individuals saw the DNA test results as a reflection of Harry's humanity, his vulnerability. For years, Harry had been portrayed as the wild prince, the troublemaker who often found himself at odds with the royal family's traditional values. But this scandal, in their eyes, was different. It wasn't just about royal bloodlines or paternity. It was about the personal struggles of a man who had been raised in a fishbowl, constantly under the watchful eye of the public. To these supporters, the DNA test results were a symbol of Harry's desire to break free from the royal family's constraints and live life on his own terms. In a world where the royals were expected to be perfect, Harry's vulnerability became something to admire. Social media played a huge role in amplifying these divergent views. On platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, debates raged as millions of people weighed in on the situation. Hashtags like #TeamHarry and #RoyalScandal trended as people shared their opinions and speculations. For some, the scandal was just another piece of royal gossip to be consumed and debated, while for others, it was a serious issue that called into question the very fabric of the monarchy. Online commentaries, memes, and viral videos emerged, each offering a different perspective on the crisis unfolding in front of the world. For better or worse, social media became a megaphone for public opinion, giving people a platform to voice their thoughts on everything from Harry's actions to the future of the royal family. One of the most divisive aspects of the reaction was the public's view of Harry's relationship with Meghan Markle. The couple had long been the subject of media scrutiny, with their decision to step back from royal duties drawing both admiration and criticism. The DNA test results only intensified this focus. For some, Meghan was seen as the one who had led Harry astray, encouraging him to reject his royal duties and live a life outside the family's control. For others, she was a victim of the media's relentless attacks on her and Harry's decision to forge their own path. The marriage of Harry and Meghan was now not only under the microscope for its potential impact on the monarchy, but also for how it reflected modern ideals of family, legacy, and independence. The media frenzy also led to increasing polarization among the public. Some argued that Harry was a victim of circumstance, a man who had been thrust into the royal spotlight without ever being able to live a normal life. These supporters saw the DNA test as yet another blow to Harry's sense of self, one more piece of evidence that he had never been allowed to define his identity on his own terms. Others, however, believed that Harry had brought this crisis upon himself. In their eyes, his desire to break free from the royal family's traditional structure, combined with his tumultuous relationship with the media, had led him down a dangerous path. The DNA test, they argued, was simply the result of years of poor decisions. In the wake of the announcement, the global media landscape was awash with speculation about Harry's future. Would the royal family be able to weather the storm, or was this the beginning of the end for the monarchy? Would Harry ever regain his place within the family, or would he be permanently cast out? These questions echoed across the globe as people from all walks of life weighed in on the scandal. While some believed that Harry's actions would have little long-term impact on the royal family's standing, others feared that this scandal could prove to be the tipping point, a moment in history that would forever change the course of the monarchy. The legal implications of the DNA test results were also widely debated. Could Harry's legal standing as a member of the royal family be affected? What would this mean for the line of succession? And could the scandal spark a wider debate about the monarchy's future in the modern age? Legal experts and royal commentators offered varying opinions, but no one could deny that the results of the DNA test would change the landscape of the royal family forever. As the dust began to settle, one thing became clear: the public's fascination with the royal family, particularly Harry, was far from over. This scandal had opened a new chapter in the story of the monarchy, one that would likely be written with as much intrigue and drama as any royal event in history. For Harry, the road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was certain: he had just set the stage for a new era of royal life, one that would be shaped as much by public opinion as by the actions of the royal family itself. The royal family, often seen as a symbol of continuity and tradition, found itself in a precarious position following the revelation of Prince Harry's DNA test results. The news sent ripples through the halls of Buckingham Palace, where staff and advisors scrambled to assess the impact of this scandal on the monarchy's future. The royal family, known for its ability to weather storms and maintain its public image, was now faced with a crisis that threatened to shake the very foundation of its public and private life. As the family tried to come to terms with the revelation, the question on everyone's mind was simple. Could the monarchy survive this scandal? For Prince Charles, the fallout from Harry's DNA test was both personal and professional. As the future king, Charles had always placed great importance on the idea of lineage and succession. The monarchy's stability had long depended on the certainty of royal bloodlines, and now that foundation was being questioned. The news that Harry was not the biological father of the child in question was a blow not only to Harry himself but to Charles, who had worked tirelessly to preserve the monarchy's reputation. In private, sources close to Charles suggested that he was deeply disappointed by the revelations. While he had always been a loving father, the news that Harry's place in the family had been shaken was something that Charles had not anticipated. It was one more complication in a life already fraught with challenges, and the weight of it seemed almost unbearable. Charles's reaction to the news was not just one of personal disappointment, it was also about the broader implications for the monarchy. The royal family had always been careful to present a united front, one that showcased strength and stability. But now, with Harry's paternity in question, that unity seemed fragile. Charles, who had long been seen as a stabilizing force within the royal family, was now forced to confront a new set of challenges. Would the monarchy survive this crisis, or would it be forever altered by the fallout? For Prince William, the situation was equally fraught. As the heir apparent to the throne, William had always known that he would eventually carry the weight of the monarchy on his shoulders. But the sudden upheaval caused by Harry's DNA test results made him reconsider what that responsibility would look like. In the months following the revelation, William reportedly struggled with his emotions. He had always been close to his younger brother, but the tension between them had been growing for years. Harry's decision to step away from royal duties had already caused a rift, and now, with the DNA test scandal at the forefront, that divide seemed impossible to mend. The tension between William and Harry, which had been simmering beneath the surface for years, now reached a breaking point. Sources close to the royal family suggested that William, though supportive of his brother, was deeply troubled by the revelation. As the second in line to the throne, William had always understood the importance of maintaining the monarchy's public image. The scandal surrounding Harry's paternity threatened to undermine that image, and it was clear that William was struggling to balance his personal loyalty to his brother with his duty to the crown. The public nature of the scandal only made things worse. For William, the question was no longer just about family, it was about the monarchy's survival. Kate Middleton, William's wife, was also caught in the crossfire of this royal scandal. As a member of the royal family who had always been mindful of the public's perception, Kate found herself in a difficult position. She had always been supportive of Harry and Meghan, but now, with the DNA test results revealing such a shocking truth, Kate had to navigate the complexities of family loyalty and public duty. There were reports that Kate was deeply troubled by the events, and sources close to her suggested that she struggled with how to support Harry without damaging her own public image. The pressure on Kate to maintain the royal family's sense of unity was immense, and it seemed like no matter which side she took, she would be criticized. At Buckingham Palace, the fallout from the DNA test results was not just about personal relationships, it was about the future of the monarchy itself. Palace aides and advisors were working overtime to manage the public narrative, trying to maintain control of a situation that was spiraling out of their grasp. There were emergency meetings held behind closed doors, with royal staff and legal teams discussing the implications of the scandal and what steps needed to be taken to minimize the damage. It was clear that this was not a matter that could be handled with a simple press release or a carefully crafted statement. The royal family's reputation was on the line, and the pressure to act swiftly and decisively was immense. One of the primary concerns of the royal family was how to manage the public's perception of Harry. The prince had always been seen as a more rebellious figure within the family, someone who had long struggled with his role and his place within the monarchy. But the DNA test scandal had changed the narrative. No longer was he simply the younger, more independent royal. Now, he was the subject of intense public scrutiny, and the question of his legitimacy within the royal family was no longer just a matter of royal gossip. It was a legal and political issue. The royal family had to figure out how to handle the growing crisis without further fracturing its fragile public image. The public's view of Harry, which had already been shifting over the years, now seemed more uncertain than ever. He had long been seen as a figure who was sympathetic to the public, someone who was relatable and down to earth. But now, with the paternity issue at the center of the media frenzy, many saw him as the cause of the royal family's problems. The narrative of the scandal was not just about Harry's personal life, it was about the monarchy's survival. The public was no longer sure what to make of him, and the royal family was caught in the crossfire. As the weeks passed, the royal family continued to manage the fallout, trying to present a united front in the face of the crisis. But it was clear that things had changed. Harry's position within the family was no longer secure, and the monarchy's future was uncertain. The questions about his legitimacy, his role in the royal family, and his relationship with his father and brother were now at the forefront of the conversation. The monarchy, for all its centuries of tradition and control, now found itself in a battle to preserve its relevance in the modern age. The DNA test had revealed more than just a personal family issue. It had exposed the cracks within the royal family that had been growing for years. And as the monarchy struggled to respond, the question remained, could they repair the damage? Or was this the beginning of a new chapter in the royal family's history, one that would be defined by scandal and division? The legal ramifications of Prince Harry's DNA test results extended far beyond the courtroom. What had started as a legal dispute over paternity had now spiraled into a matter of public and royal significance. The DNA test, which had been ordered as part of the ongoing legal battle surrounding Harry's personal life, was not just a private family issue anymore. It was now a legal and political crisis with far-reaching consequences. The question on everyone's mind was whether the test results would have lasting effects on Harry's legal standing, both as a member of the royal family and as a public figure. The immediate concern for Harry's legal team was how to manage the fallout from the DNA test. In legal terms, the results of the test were irrefutable. They confirmed that Harry was not the biological father of the child in question. However, the legal implications went far beyond the issue of paternity. The legal team had to consider how the results of the test could affect Harry's relationship with the royal family, his role within the monarchy, and his rights as a citizen. At the center of the issue was the fact that Harry had always been a public figure, a member of the royal family with a unique legal status. His legal position was now under intense scrutiny, and the legal team had to navigate a minefield of legal precedents, royal protocols, and public opinion. One of the most pressing concerns was whether the DNA test results would affect Harry's position within the line of succession to the throne. While the test results did not directly address this issue, the broader implications of the scandal were impossible to ignore. The royal family, with its centuries of tradition and strict protocols surrounding succession, now found itself at a crossroads. Could Harry, who had always been second in line to the throne, maintain his position within the family given the revelations about his paternity? Would the monarchy, which had long placed such great importance on bloodlines and family ties, be willing to allow someone whose legitimacy had been questioned to remain in the line of succession? The legal ramifications of the paternity test were further complicated by the fact that Harry had long been at odds with certain members of the royal family. His decision to step back from royal duties, as well as his outspoken criticism of certain aspects of royal life, had already strained his relationship with his family. Now, with the scandal surrounding his paternity taking center stage, the rift between Harry and the monarchy seemed impossible to bridge. While the legal team worked diligently to address the technical aspects of the case, the broader question of Harry's future within the royal family remained unanswered. Harry's relationship with his father, Prince Charles, was one of the most sensitive issues in the wake of the scandal. As the future King of England, Charles had long upheld the traditions of the monarchy. He was a staunch defender of the royal family's image and had placed great importance on the preservation of the bloodline. The revelation that Harry's paternity was now in question was not just a blow to Harry, it was a blow to Charles and to the monarchy itself. The legal team understood that repairing the relationship between father and son would require more than just legal maneuvering. It would require a significant shift in the way the royal family approached issues of legacy, duty, and public perception. In addition to the issue of succession, the legal team had to consider the broader implications of the paternity scandal on Harry's finances and legal standing as a private citizen. As a member of the royal family, Harry had always enjoyed certain privileges, including financial support from the monarchy. However, with his position now in question, the future of those privileges was uncertain. Legal experts debated whether Harry could continue to rely on the royal family for financial support, or whether he would be forced to seek independent means of income. His personal wealth, which had been bolstered by his book deals and media engagements, was now under scrutiny, with questions arising about how much he would be able to retain given the public fallout from the scandal. As the legal battle continued, one of the key issues was whether Harry would be required to undergo further legal proceedings to address the paternity issue. While the DNA test results were conclusive, there were still lingering questions about the legal rights of the child in question, as well as the potential for future legal challenges. Some experts speculated that Harry could be forced to undergo additional tests or submit to a more thorough legal review of his paternity. Others argued that the matter could be settled without further litigation, as long as the royal family was willing to accept the results and move forward. The implications of the DNA test also raised questions about the future of Harry's relationship with his children, Archie and Lilibet. While the test had not directly involved them, the scandal surrounding Harry's paternity now cast a shadow over their future. What would this mean for their inheritance rights, and how would it affect their position within the royal family? These questions were particularly pressing given the royal family's strict rules regarding succession and inheritance. If Harry's legitimacy was in question, what did that mean for the legitimacy of his children? Would they be able to inherit titles or properties from the royal family, or would their standing be diminished because of the scandal? For the royal family, the legal ramifications of the DNA test were not just about Harry's personal life. They were about the very future of the monarchy. The monarchy, with its centuries of tradition and carefully guarded image, was now being forced to confront a new reality. The idea that the family's legacy could be compromised by the actions of one of its own members. The legal team at Buckingham Palace was working to assess the damage and determine how best to proceed, but there was no easy solution. The royal family was at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the coming weeks would have far-reaching consequences. As the legal proceedings continued, Harry's legal team remained steadfast in their determination to protect him. They knew that the stakes were high, and that the outcome of the case could determine the future of both Harry and the monarchy. The legal battle was not just about paternity, it was about protecting Harry's place in history, his family's legacy, and his future within the royal fold. It was clear that the fight was far from over, and that the legal consequences of the DNA test would continue to unfold in the weeks and months to come. The revelation of the DNA test results and the subsequent fallout from Prince Harry's collapse in court had a profound psychological impact on the prince. While the world watched in shock as the results of the test were announced, Harry was left to process the emotional and mental toll of what had just transpired. For someone who had spent much of his life under the microscope of the media and the public, this scandal marked a turning point in his personal journey, a moment that forced him to confront not only his identity within the royal family, but also the broader implications of his past actions and decisions. For years, Harry had struggled with his place within the royal family. As the second son of Prince Charles and the late Princess Diana, Harry had always been the heir to the throne, someone who was never quite in line for the crown, but was expected to play his part within the monarchy's rigid hierarchy. Growing up in the royal spotlight, Harry had long been aware of the expectations placed upon him. He was expected to maintain a public image of duty, decorum, and tradition, while privately navigating the complexities of being a member of a family that had long struggled with its own internal tensions and contradictions. The DNA test results, however, forced Harry to confront a far deeper issue than just his place in the royal family. The shock of learning that he was not the biological father of the child in question was something that he had not anticipated, and it sent him spiraling into a personal crisis. For Harry, who had already dealt with the loss of his mother, Princess Diana, at a young age, the notion of identity and family was a deeply emotional subject. Diana's death had always loomed large in Harry's life, and it had shaped much of his public persona. He had spent much of his adulthood trying to reconcile the image of the young prince who had lost his mother with the adult man he had become. The news of the DNA test felt like a betrayal to Harry. He had always tried to live his life with authenticity, even as he faced the challenges of being in the public eye. But this scandal, which called into question not only his fatherhood but also his identity within the family, forced him to confront the very thing he had spent years running from, the complicated, fractured nature of his relationship with the monarchy. In the aftermath of the collapse in court, sources close to Harry reported that he had been struggling with feelings of isolation and self-doubt. Despite his public persona as a confident, outspoken royal, Harry was deeply affected by the events that had unfolded. The pressure of living under the constant scrutiny of the press and the public had already taken a toll on his mental health, but the DNA test scandal pushed him to a breaking point. The very foundation of his identity, his place in the royal family, his role as a father, and his sense of self-worth was now in question. The result was a profound emotional and psychological crisis that left Harry grappling with his next steps. The collapse in court and the public exposure of his paternity issue were not the only psychological challenges that Harry faced. The intense media scrutiny that followed the scandal only exacerbated his emotional distress. The press, which had already been relentless in its pursuit of royal stories, now turned its focus squarely on Harry. Paparazzi images, headlines, and articles continued to pour in from all directions, leaving Harry feeling trapped and unable to escape the public's gaze. The constant barrage of media attention was overwhelming, and for someone who had already struggled with the pressures of being a public figure, it became an unbearable weight. In interviews and public statements following the scandal, Harry spoke about the emotional toll that being a member of the royal family had taken on him over the years. He admitted that he had often felt like an outsider within his own family, and that the rigid expectations placed upon him had created a sense of alienation. For much of his life, Harry had sought to carve out his own path, but the DNA test scandal forced him to confront the harsh reality that his personal choices, his desire to break away from the royal family's traditions, his decision to marry Meghan Markle, and his outspoken criticisms of the monarchy had come at a significant cost. Harry's decision to step back from his royal duties, though hailed by some as a brave move, had not been without its psychological toll. The decision to distance himself from the royal family, particularly at a time when tensions were already high, had caused a rift with certain members of his family. While Harry had always been close to his brother William and his father Charles, the tension surrounding the royal family's internal dynamics had made it difficult for him to maintain those relationships. The paternity scandal now added another layer of strain, and Harry was left to wonder if he would ever truly be accepted